Imagine standing on a cold mountain road in the Balkans. The wind is quiet, too quiet. Then you hear it. Not screams, not cries for help, just the sound of thousands of feet dragging across stone. You look closer, and your stomach tightens. Men are walking in long lines, 15,000 of them. But they are not marching like soldiers. Their eyes are gone. Each man's face is wrapped in blood-stained cloth. Their hands stretch forward, touching the shoulder of the man in front of them, afraid to let go. They stumble. They fall. Some never stand up again. At the front of every group walks one man with a single eye. One eye for every 100 blind men. This is not mercy. This is a message sent by the most powerful empire of its time. A message written not with ink, but with human suffering. This was not a battle. This was not justice. This was revenge so cruel that death would have been kinder. And when these broken men finally reached their king, when he saw what had been done to his army, his heart could not survive the sight. This is the story of what the Byzantine Empire did to 15,000 Bulgarian prisoners, and why history still whispers about it in horror. Make sure to watch the video all the way till the end. I promise you're going to find it super informative. We put a lot of hard work into bringing you this content, so don't forget to hit that subscribe button, give the video a like, and share it with your friends. Your support helps the channel grow and motivates us to keep creating even better videos for you. Before the mountains filled with screams, before the eyes were taken, before 15,000 men were turned into walking shadows, there was hatred, deep, old, burning hatred. The Byzantine Empire and the Bulgarian Empire were not just enemies. They were rivals who had stared at each other across battlefields for generations. Every war added new wounds. Every treaty was broken sooner or later. Every victory demanded revenge. For the Byzantines, Bulgaria was more than a neighbor. It was an insult. The Bulgarian Empire stood in the Balkans like a wall. It blocked Byzantine control of key lands, trade routes, and power. Every Bulgarian victory reminded Constantinople that the empire was not invincible. And every loss made the Byzantines angrier, colder, more determined. For the Bulgarians, Byzantium was worse. The Byzantine emperors saw themselves as chosen by God. They believed their empire was eternal. When Bulgarian armies defeated them, it shattered that image. To the Bulgarians, Byzantium was arrogant, cruel, and hungry for domination. This hatred reached its peak under two men. On one side stood Emperor Basil II of Byzantium, a man who believed fear was stronger than mercy. Calm, patient, ruthless, he did not rush into battle. He waited, he watched, and when he struck to destroy not just armies, but hope. On the other side stood Tsar Samuel of Bulgaria, fierce, proud, and desperate to protect his land. Samuel was a warrior king. He knew the mountains, the passes, the valleys. He fought not for glory, but for survival. The Balkans became their battlefield. Year after year, armies marched. Villages burned. Fields were destroyed. Families fled or starved. Soldiers learned to hate not just the enemy's flag, but their language, their faces, their very existence. Byzantine soldiers told stories of Bulgarian cruelty. Bulgarian soldiers whispered about Byzantine betrayal. No one trusted mercy anymore. By the early 11th century, this war was no longer about land. It was about humiliation. Basil II wanted to break Bulgaria forever. Samuel wanted to prove Bulgaria could never be broken. Both men believed God was on their side. And when leaders believe that, human lives become tools. As tensions rose, Samuel prepared something bold, something dangerous, something that would either save Bulgaria or destroy it. He chose the mountains. The Gora Mountains were not gentle hills. They were steep, narrow, and deadly. Samuel knew that if he could trap the Byzantine army there, numbers would not matter. Armor would slow them. Discipline would fail. Fear would take control. Samuel gathered his men. He fortified passes. He hid forces among rocks and forests. He waited. Basil II marched confidently into the region. His army was strong, trained, and experienced. He believed no mountain could stop the power of Byzantium. That belief would soon be tested. And when steel finally met steel in those dark mountain paths, the world would change forever, because the battle that followed would not just decide a war. It would create one of the most horrifying acts of revenge in human history. The Gora Mountains did not welcome outsiders. Narrow paths cut through steep cliffs. Thick forests blocked the sun. Fog rolled in without warning. Sound traveled strangely there. Footsteps echoed, but screams disappeared into the trees. Tsar Samuel knew this land like a living thing. Every ridge, every hidden turn, every place where an army could die without understanding why. This was where he would stop the Byzantines. Samuel ordered his men to build wooden walls across the mountain passes. Not tall walls, but strong enough to slow an army. He placed soldiers above the roads, hiding them behind rocks and trees. Archers waited in silence, arrows ready. Heavy stones were placed on slopes, balanced carefully, waiting to be pushed. It was not a battlefield. It was a trap. When Emperor Basil II led his army into the mountains, he did not expect resistance here. He believed Samuel would avoid direct conflict. Basil thought the Bulgarians were afraid. He was wrong. The Byzantine soldiers marched in long columns. Armor clinked softly. Shields knocked together. The path grew tighter with every step. Horses struggled. Supply wagons slowed everything down. Then the road stopped. In front of them stood a wooden barrier, blocking the pass. At first, the Byzantines laughed. A simple wall could not stop the greatest army in the region. Basil ordered his men forward. Engineers moved to break it. Soldiers stepped closer. That was the moment Samuel was waiting for. From above, the forest came alive. Arrows rained down like black rain. They struck shields, faces, necks. Men screamed and fell, crushing those behind them. Before the Byzantines could react, huge stones rolled down the slopes, smashing into tightly packed soldiers. Panic spread fast. There was no room to retreat, no space to form lines. Men tripped over bodies. Horses screamed as they were hit. Officers shouted orders that no one could hear. Then Bulgarian infantry attacked. They charged down from hidden paths, screaming war cries that echoed through the mountains. Axes and spears struck men who could barely raise their shields. Byzantine discipline collapsed. This was not a fair fight. It was slaughter. For hours, the Byzantines tried to break through the barrier. They failed again and again. The dead piled up. Blood soaked the mountain road and ran into the dirt like dark water. Finally, Basil II realized the truth. He was trapped. With heavy losses and no clear victory, he ordered a retreat. It was the only way to save what remained of his army. Under cover of night, battered and humiliated, the Byzantine forces pulled back. Samuel had won. The Bulgarians celebrated in the mountains. They believed this victory would change everything. They believed Byzantium would finally fear them. But victories can be dangerous, because humiliation does not end wars. It sharpens them. When Basil II escaped the mountains, his face showed no emotion. He did not scream. He did not rage. But inside him something hardened. He had not just lost a battle. He had been embarrassed. And Basil II did not forgive embarrassment. He returned to Constantinople with one goal burning in his mind. Bulgaria would pay, not with gold, not with land, but with suffering so deep that no one would ever challenge Byzantium again. The war was far from over. In fact, the worst was still coming. Emperor Basil II did not strike back immediately. That was his greatest strength, patience. While the Bulgarians celebrated, Basil prepared. He rebuilt his army slowly and carefully. New soldiers were trained. Supplies were gathered. Roads were secured. Every mistake made in the mountains was studied again and again. Basil did not want another battle. He wanted total control. For years, Byzantine forces returned to Bulgarian lands like a rising tide. They avoided traps. They attacked forts one by one. Villages were burned. Crops were destroyed. People were forced to flee or starve. This was not war for honor. It was war to break a nation. Bulgarian resistance weakened. Samuel's men were brave, but hunger and exhaustion drained them. Every season made the empire stronger and Bulgaria weaker. Finally, the two armies met again near Kleidion, close to the same mountain regions where Samuel once felt safe. This time Basil was ready. The Byzantines attacked with precision. They outflanked Bulgarian positions. They cut off escape routes. The Bulgarians fought desperately, but the balance had changed. By nightfall, the battlefield was silent. The Bulgarian army was destroyed. Thousands lay dead. Thousands more were captured. Around 15,000 Bulgarian soldiers fell into Byzantine hands. Captured soldiers usually expected ransom, slavery, or execution. They prayed for mercy. Some hoped Basil would spare them to show power through kindness. They did not understand who they faced. Basil looked at the prisoners and saw more than enemies. He saw the humiliation of the mountains. He saw years of resistance. He saw a warning that needed to be written in blood. Then he gave his order. Every Bulgarian prisoner was to be blinded. Not killed, not imprisoned, blinded. Soldiers were dragged forward one by one. Hot iron, knives, sharp tools, the methods did not matter. Screams filled the camps. Men begged. Men fainted. Men died from shock and pain. But the order did not stop. For every 100 men, one was left with a single eye. One eye to lead the rest home. By the time it was over, 15,000 men stood in darkness. They were still alive, but their lives were destroyed. They were turned loose and ordered to walk back to Bulgaria. No food, no care, no mercy, just a long road home through mountains and forests, guided only by half-blind leaders and broken hope. This was psychological warfare. Basil wanted the Bulgarian people to see what resistance brought. He wanted Samuel to see it most of all. And so the columns began to move. Lines of blind men, hands on shoulders, faces covered in blood and tears. Step by step, they walked toward home, toward their king, toward a moment that would end everything. The road back to Bulgaria became a path of suffering. The blinded soldiers moved slowly, one hand gripping the shoulder in front of them, the other reaching into empty air. Their feet dragged across stones and dirt. Many had never walked without sight before. Now they had no choice. Every 100 men followed one guide. a man with one eye left. He was not spared out of mercy. He was spared for cruelty. His single eye was a chain. He had to see every stumble, every fall, every man who collapsed and could not rise again. The journey took days, then weeks. Food ran out quickly. Some men tried to eat leaves. Others drank dirty water from streams. Infections spread through untreated wounds. Many died quietly on the road, their bodies left behind because the living could not find them again. Villagers who saw them froze in horror. Parents covered their children's eyes. Old men crossed themselves in fear. Women wept as the columns passed. This was not an army anymore. It was a warning made of flesh. Word spread ahead of them. People whispered that Byzantium had sent a curse walking across the land. Some believed God himself had turned away from Bulgaria. At last, the survivors reached Tsar Samuel's court. Samuel was waiting. He had heard rumors, horrible rumors, but nothing prepared him for the truth. When the first group entered, Samuel stepped forward and stopped. He saw empty eye sockets, bloody cloth, faces frozen in pain. Thousands of men he once commanded now reduced to shadows. Then he understood the pattern. One man guiding 100, one eye watching the rest suffer. Samuel screamed. The sight broke him. This was not defeat in battle. This was the death of hope. The king clutched his chest and collapsed. His heart failed him in that moment, overwhelmed by shock and grief. Within days, Tsar Samuel was dead. Basil's message had been delivered. Without their king, Bulgaria weakened further. Resistance collapsed. Fortresses fell. One by one, the empire absorbed what remained of Bulgarian lands. Basil II earned a name that history would never forget. The Bulgar-Slayer, not because he killed the most enemies, but because he destroyed an entire people's spirit. The blinded soldiers did not return to war. Many begged on roads. Many died forgotten. Their suffering became legend, a story told in whispers to children to explain why some wars should never be fought. This was victory without mercy, power without limits, and a reminder that sometimes the worst punishment is not death, but living after everything has been taken from you. After Tsar Samuel's death, Bulgaria did not fall in one dramatic moment, collapsed slowly, like a body that keeps breathing after the heart is gone. The blinded soldiers were still there, thousands of them, living proof of what defying Byzantium meant. They sat outside villages, along roads, near churches. Some begged. Some sang old war songs softly, unable to remember how battles once looked. Others stayed silent forever. People could not escape them. Every time a Bulgarian mother saw a blind man guided by another, she imagined her own son. Every time a father passed them, he felt shame and fear mixed together. The war was no longer far away. It was everywhere. This was exactly what Emperor Basil II wanted. He did not need to kill more soldiers. Fear did the work for him. Bulgarian nobles began to surrender. Fortresses opened their gates without a fight. Some leaders even offered loyalty to Byzantium, hoping to save their families. Resistance became rare, then disappeared completely. Byzantium took control of Bulgaria not just with armies but with memory. The memory of the blinded men. Basil II returned to Constantinople as a hero. Churches praised him. Officials celebrated his victory. Coins were made with his image. He was called strong, chosen, unstoppable. But history does not forget what people try to hide. Outside the empire's walls, people told the story differently. They did not talk about strategy or power. They talked about cruelty. They asked a question that never had an answer. Why was blindness chosen? Because blindness is slow. Because a blind man remembers what the world used to look like. He remembers sunlight, faces, weapons, freedom, and every memory becomes pain. Death ends suffering. Blindness stretches it across a lifetime. The Byzantine Empire wanted Bulgaria alive but broken. That was the real victory. Years passed. Basil II ruled longer than most emperors. He never married. He never named an heir. His life was devoted to control, discipline, and fear. When he died in 1025, the empire was at its strongest. But something had changed. The empire had shown the world what it was capable of. And the world remembered. Later enemies would fight harder, not softer, because they knew surrender might be worse than death. Later rebellions would burn brighter, because mercy could no longer be expected. The blinded soldiers became more than victims. They became a symbol of what happens when power forgets humanity. Today, their names are lost, their faces are gone, but their suffering still echoes across history, not as numbers, not as statistics, but as a warning. Because when an empire chooses cruelty over mercy, it may win the war, but it loses something far more important. Long after the blinded soldiers disappeared from the roads, their shadows remained. They lived on in memory. Children grew up hearing the story whispered at night. Parents told it not as history, but as a lesson. A warning about power. A warning about what happens when rulers stop seeing people as human beings. The Byzantine Empire survived. For a time, it stood stronger than ever. Basil II's reign became a golden age of control and order. Borders were secure. Enemies were silent. Rebellions were rare. Fear worked, but fear has a cost. After Basil's death, the empire slowly changed. New emperors lacked his discipline. Some were careless. Others were weak. They inherited a kingdom built on terror but did not understand how to control it. The memory of the Bulgarian punishment spread beyond the Balkans. Other nations heard it and prepared differently. They fought harder. They refused surrender. They chose death over capture. Mercy was gone. The blinded soldiers had ended it. Centuries later, historians would debate Basil II. Some called him a great ruler. Others called him a monster. Both were right. He was effective. He was cruel. And those two truths cannot be separated. The Bulgarian Empire never fully returned. Its land was absorbed, its power broken, but its people survived. They carried the story forward, generation by generation, refusing to forget what was done to them, because forgetting would mean accepting it. The real tragedy was not just the loss of sight. It was the loss of trust between humans. When rulers decide that suffering is a tool, the world becomes darker for everyone. The story of the 15,000 blind men reminds us of something uncomfortable. Evil does not always scream. Sometimes it plans. Sometimes it waits. Sometimes it wins. And sometimes it wears a crown. This was a victory written in darkness, a punishment worse than death, and a chapter of history that still asks us a question. When power has no limits, who will stop it?